Florida's freshwater springs draw thousands of visitors who come to float in the sun. From the surface, the water is inviting and perfectly clear. But beneath the tree roots and the limestone lies an environment entirely hostile to human life. Today, we are looking at two highly trained technical divers who entered two different cave systems. Both men carried extensive equipment and deep experience. But in these narrow cracks, a single tiny mistake cascades rapidly into an irreversible trap. Survival here is dictated by the rock above. If a diver runs out of air or experiences an equipment failure in the open ocean, they can swim straight up. In an underwater cave, a direct vertical ascent to oxygen is physically impossible. You are trapped under a solid ceiling. To make matters worse, the floor of these passages is often coated in deep, fine sediment. A single misplaced fin kick or a panicked thrash throws that sediment into the water. Divers call this a silt out. Within seconds, water that was clear enough to see across turns into a blinding, impenetrable cloud. You cannot swim up, and in a silt out, you cannot rely on your eyes. Stripped of sight and vertical escape, survival in an underwater cave hinges entirely on a single, fragile method of navigation. That method is the gold line. It is a permanent, physical nylon thread running through the main passages of the cave. It is tied to the rock, and it is the single reliable map connecting a diver to the exit. If you lose physical contact with that line during a silt out, you lose all sense of up, down, or forward. You are suspended in dark water, feeling along smooth rock walls. The mathematics of finding an exit by pure chance are near zero. Maintaining a grip on the gold line is the rule that keeps divers alive. Without that physical connection, a manageable technical problem becomes certain death. Our first location is School Sink. Hidden beneath this unremarkable patch of Florida scrub, right behind a bowling alley, sits one of the longest underwater cave systems on the planet. This diagram shows a cross-section of a 3-foot-high section called the Shortcut Tunnel. Because the ocean is nearby, salt water pushes into the cave and meets the fresh water. They refuse to blend cleanly, producing a boundary called a halocline. The water in this zone shimmers and smears, distorting a diver's vision. Two divers, Joe and Spencer, were moving flat through this exact slot when Spencer developed an unexpected problem with his breathing gas. Within the blurred visual distortion of the halocline, the two men drifted apart and lost sight of one another. Spencer began struggling to breathe. Succumbing to panic, he grabbed the main gold line, and instead of swimming carefully beside it, he hauled himself hand over hand along the thread in a desperate bolt toward the exit. That violent, panicked escape attempt kicked up the sediment, blinding the entire section of the cave with a massive silt out. By dragging his heavy weight along the fragile gold line, he ripped the lifeline from its placements, destroying it. Behind him, Joe realized the main line was gone. He executed a textbook self-rescue. He pulled out his own backup spool, intending to tie off his thread and sweep the area to find the main route. But Spencer's panicked retreat had already filled the water with dense sediment. Joe was now trying to tie off a tiny string in zero visibility. Somewhere in the dark, working with thick gloves, his fingers slipped. He dropped his backup spool. In a heavily silted cave, a dropped object does not fall cleanly. It sinks into a cloud of mud. A spool resting a few feet away on the floor is gone forever. Joe was stripped of his secondary lifeline. Still fighting to survive, Joe reached for his final option, his second backup spool. He prepared to deploy it into the black water, but when he grabbed the string, he found almost nothing. The second spool had only inches of usable line left on it. He was now entirely out of line, relying entirely on touch. As he pushed forward, he repeatedly hit what divers call line traps, deep crevices in the rock where Spencer had yanked the main line out of reach, leaving dead ends that a human body could not squeeze into. Joe did not panic. He executed proper, calculated self-rescue techniques from the moment he lost contact. He died because his environment stripped away his physical options faster than he could use them. At Ginnie Springs, a diver named Mark encountered a crisis defined by the equipment he brought with him. This image shows a rebreather apparatus. Standard scuba tanks vent your exhaled breath into the water as wasted bubbles. A rebreather scrubs carbon dioxide from your exhale, adds fresh oxygen, and hands the exact gas back to breathe again. By recycling gas, this technology multiplies a diver's capacity. It turns a standard 40-minute scuba dive into an uninterrupted all-day expedition. Mark devised a plan to use the rebreather to travel thousands of feet deep into the system. Once he reached a series of passages too tight for the bulky machine, he would take the rebreather off, leave it sitting on the cave floor, push through the tight rock wearing standard scuba tanks, and then return to his machine to go home. The plan required him to swim deep into an unforgiving cave and deliberately detach himself from his primary life support. For hours, the plan worked. Mark mapped the tight passages, recorded his survey data, and swam back out to the main tunnel. But when he reached his staging point, he found that the unattended rebreather had flooded with water, rendering it a heavy, useless brick. Mark is now 3,800 feet deep inside the earth. The passage around him is clouded with thick silt from his exit. He has been breathing hard, his scuba tanks are running low, and the machine he relies on to survive the long journey home is dead. This top-down schematic shows exactly where Mark was relative to his backup gear. Unlike Joe, Mark was surrounded by survival options. He had placed a full bailout bottle of breathable gas a mere 50 feet away. And the options did not stop there. Further along his exit route, he staged 3 additional air tanks, containing enough oxygen to carry him to the surface. He had a backup plan and abundant breathable gas resting just out of reach. But exhausted, breathing heavily in the dark silt, he never bridged that 50-foot gap. He died resting next to his flooded machine. Joe fought in the dark until the environment stripped away his last physical option. Mark died surrounded by perfectly placed, unused lifelines. Meticulous planning, rigid self-rescue rules, and advanced technology do not bend an underwater cave to your will. They merely alter the mechanics of how a failure state unfolds. Human rules, backup spools, and chemical scrubbers offer an illusion of control. Beneath thousands of pounds of solid rock, nature always has the final say.